What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Hoops Dialogue show on the Hoops Dialogue YouTube channel. I'm Sam,
I'm Jack.
and this is our first episode of our long form YouTube series where we're going to break down things that are going on in the NBA season and just everything about the NBA world. We'll have current events and more throwback NBA content. We're uploading short form content daily on YouTube Shorts and TikTok. Check us out on both of those. Same channel here at hoops_dialogue. Today we have a special episode for you guys. It's our first long form episode. We got a loyal Pelicans supporter here, a true day one, and he's going to break down where exactly he feels like the Pelicans are at now and where the Pelicans can go this season and beyond. So first I want to ask you, Jack, is just how you're feeling about where the Pelicans are at. They're 18-9 to start. They're number one in the West. They're just coming off a 7-game win streak. Where are the vibes at? Tell me where your head's at as a Pelicans fan and what you're feeling now, especially coming off a few controversial games against the Phoenix Suns that I'm sure you'll fill us in about as well.
I'm feeling great about this last stretch of games, especially with BI being out of the lineup and Zion taking the primary offensive role for the team. This is the best that I've felt about the Pelicans probably ever in terms of title chances. Even when we had Anthony Davis and he looked like one of the top 5 players in the NBA, I still never felt that we had a good enough team around him to really make a push past the second round, and we never did. But at this point, the Pelicans have all their assets. They have a great team. They have incredible depth. They have the top-end talent to make a real run at the Western Conference Finals and potentially the NBA Finals this year. So there's nothing bad that I can say about the start that we've had for these past 25 games.
Yeah, definitely. And I also want to ask you, how are you feeling about Zion specifically? Because there was a lot of drama last year, conversations about if he was unhappy with the Pelicans, if his camp was unhappy with the Pelicans, if he was going to turn down the qualifying offer. All of that ended up not being a real thing. He signed the max extension and put sort of all those rumors to bed. But I'm sure as a fan, hearing that on the news cycle and seeing that on social media and everything had to be unsettling. I know you and a lot of my friends that are Pelicans fans just felt annoyed by the way that the media was covering that. But regardless, how are you feeling about where Zion is at now, given that he's playing at such a high level and y'all are playing at such a high level? What's your level of excitement there with him kind of fulfilling what y'all were looking at with that number one pick?
Yeah, it's huge. Like you mentioned, he missed all of last year with the foot injury. Many of us expected him to be back by Christmas, based off of promises by David Griffin in the front office, but obviously that didn't come to be. It was clear that Zion, had to spend some time away from the team to try and gain some perspective on not only his career in New Orleans, but the team as a whole. And I feel like it did him some good, actually. It seemed like he became better as a player by sitting out that entire year. His perspective on the game is different. He's seeing things on the court happen faster. I don't think that he was ever going to accept the qualifying offer just because missing an entire year of basketball, you kind of need that guaranteed money at that point. But this year, I definitely think he's seeing the game at a higher level. He's averaging 25, 7, and 3.5. He's running the offense since BI's been out for the past 8 games, and he's really carrying a huge offensive load with a usage rate above 35%.
Let me ask you because, we've seen Zion have a crazy season. It was his second year in the league. He averaged, 27?
27, yeah.
And was an all-star. What are you seeing from him this year that is evolved or better than, we've seen him great before, but what is it exactly about his game this year that is being taken to a next level for fans that might not watch every Pelicans game and just kind of see the highlights? What are the little things that are going right for Zion right now?
So yeah, for me, I think it's been his defense, honestly. He's moving his feet really well. He's contesting shots. He's rotating from the weak side, and he's doing everything that he can to use his athleticism on that side of the floor. And I think that's big that Willie Green has been able to make him buy in on that side. That's always been the huge issue with Zion. You look back at the bubble, and it looked like they were playing 4-on-5 when he was a defender. I mean, he just wouldn't move his feet. He would trust the people behind him to make ridiculous plays on his man, leaving the weak side open. But this year, he's really, I mean, he's opponent field goal percentage is somewhere around 38% on twos, which is absolutely ridiculous. He's forcing guys to take tough pull-up jumpers. He has the weight and the strength to be able to force them to a certain side, and the rest of the team is just feeding off of that energy with that mentality of being a stopper on defense.
Absolutely. Going into that, I want to talk a little bit about some of the games that have happened recently. There are 2 games against the Suns back-to-back that y'all had in this past week. And for those that don't know or may not remember, the Pelicans and Suns played each other in the first round of the playoffs last year in the 2021 season, and y'all took it to 6 games. They were missing Devin Booker for part of the series. He eventually ended up coming back, but the Suns were the 1 seed, Pelicans were the 8 seed, and y'all were playing without Zion. Like we said, he missed the whole year. But there was some chippiness in that series. It kind of started with Chris Paul and Jose Alvarado getting into it a little bit. Jose Alvarado was honestly a menace to Chris Paul that entire season, like doing the thing where he runs up behind, steals the ball. All very like Chris Paul-like tactics of just like being a pest, but also just going really hard on defense. So you would think that would be something that, Chris Paul would respect, but sometimes when people are too alike, too similar, they just end up butting heads. But it's clear that a bit of a rivalry started to bubble, or some bad feelings started to bubble over between those teams during the playoffs. And it kind of ends up coming to a head this past week where y'all are matched up to play in back-to-back games. And in the first game, Zion ends up scoring 35 points. He has 7 rebounds and 4 assists. And in the closing seconds of that game, after things had been chippy kind of all game, Chris Paul goes in for a layup as time is expiring. You could argue he was trying to get them within 5 points with like 12 seconds left to maybe try to do something, or he was just trying to stat pad. People have said both. Regardless, he misses. The Pelicans get the rebound. Larry Nance throws an outlet pass to Zion down the court. As time is expiring, no one's guarding him. Zion goes and throws down one of the nastiest 360, hardest dunks I've ever seen, and kind of violates what is an unwritten rule in basketball, which is not to flex on your opponent, stunt on your opponent as time is expiring, and score on them in a game that is essentially over. Zion, after the game, actually admitted that that was out of his character. He may have pushed it a bit too far, but exactly like you mentioned before, he said that what he had to go through watching his teammates get knocked out by this team and not being able to do anything, not being able to be there, kind of lit a fire under him and made him want to really make a statement in this game. Bunch of drama ensues. Cameron Payne from the Suns ends up saying that it was lack of sportsmanship, and kind of just goes from there. And that there was a little bit of a scuffle on the court afterwards where Chris Paul and Jose Alvarado are kind of getting into it again. Cameron Payne starts getting into it. And then Willie Green and Monty Williams start getting into it a little bit. So just give me your thoughts on the beef with the Suns and the potential of this to be a rivalry going forward. Is this something that you think actually has like the teeth to become a real exciting rivalry in the NBA? Because I feel like that's kind of something we are lacking a little bit, like teams that truly hate each other. The rivalries and narratives in the NBA right now are more centered around players, like especially since LeBron left Cleveland. It's not like the Cavs versus the Warriors. It's like LeBron versus Steph. Because like the Lakers and Warriors don't hate each other and don't have that history. So do you think this has a chance to be like a real rivalry? And what are your thoughts on the Phoenix Suns just in general? I want you to start out with actually the the second one. What is your perspective on the Phoenix Suns calling y'all out for not being sportsmanlike, and what are your thoughts just of Phoenix from the perspective of a rival team's fan base?
Yeah. So first off, if Willie Green is hot, that means somebody said something they should have. That's number one. Willie Green, over the past year that he's been our head coach, has gotten emotional maybe 5 times. I think it was, in the play-in last year, we saw some emotion come out of him with his speech during the game. And then when we end up winning the game to eventually make it into the playoffs, he showed some emotion there. But other than that, he's a really even-keeled guy. And he got really hot during that little scuffle towards the end of the game. So that's the first thing. Somebody said something they shouldn't have. The second thing is I'm honestly surprised that they called us out like that because, like you said, Chris Paul went in to go for a layup with 9 seconds left. It was very little shot that they come out winning that game. Even if he does make that layup, the game was basically over at that point. He misses the layup. Like you said, Larry Nance outlets to Zion. Zion throws down a nasty dunk for the fans that he wasn't able to play for all of last year. That's a statement dunk from Zion, and it's a statement dunk for the city of New Orleans. And we're going to keep it petty and repeat what CJ McCollum said in his post-game interview. If y'all don't want him to dunk like that, get back on defense. There's still time on the clock. Y'all got to get back or just let him do it. I like what DeAndre Ayton said. He was like, I don't care. It's their home floor. He's showing out for his fans. It is what it is, yada, yada, yada. I appreciated that DeAndre Ayton said that. And I also thought that it was interesting that he said that coming off the drama that we seen from him and the Suns this past summer. But overall, man, it is a budding rivalry, and it's going to be really interesting to watch a game. I think they play again on Sunday, and that will be their last meeting of the season until potentially the playoffs. But yeah, I think it's a really interesting rivalry. There's a lot of things, like a lot of history between these teams. If you remember when Brandon Ingram was on the Lakers, he punched Chris Paul in the face when LeBron was holding him. When Chris Paul played for the Houston Rockets, they do not like each other.
He swung
tried.
And missed a little bit, but
he tried. But he ended
there.
up getting suspended for those games, for throwing a punch. Chris Paul used to play for New Orleans. Jose Alvarado, like you said, and Chris Paul hate each other.
Bro, I saw a picture of Chris Paul and Willie Green playing together on New Orleans under Monty Williams as the coach.
I know. There's a lot of parallels between these two teams. Coach Green and Monty Williams are really, really good friends. Coach Green and Chris Paul are really good friends.
And
Willie Green was
their
an assistant
yeah.
during their finals run back in 2020, or was that 2021?
20. These pandemic years blur together. But yes, 2 seasons ago when they made the finals and lost to the Bucks. Yeah.
Yeah. So Willie Green knows everybody in that front office. He knows everybody on that coaching staff, and he knows majority of the players on that team. So there's a lot of parallels that go into this. I
thought it was hilarious that he was really looking at Cameron Payne like, bro, I know you.
Right.
Like, you're not going to do shit.
Right. Absolutely. And Cameron Payne said something, and Willie got heated. Both coaching staffs had to get involved and bring their guys back. Nobody was going to actually fight. But you can tell that everybody was pretty hot in that moment. And then I thought it was pretty incredible. As a Pelicans fan, I expect after a great win like that, us to come out sloppy in the next game because that's just how we've done it in years past. But we came out, we hit them hard. Zion dominated with 35 yet again, and we came out with back-to-back dubs against the number 1 seed last year. So, it was a great weekend for the Pelicans.
It really was. And, man, just one more thing I got to touch on the Suns. And maybe I'm a salty Lakers fan coming from the perspective of they beat the Lakers in the playoffs on their run to the finals. But they beat the Lakers without AD and were acting like tough guys the whole time, mainly Devin Booker, Cam Payne, and Jay Crowder. But I just have a little salt towards that team, and I feel like they can dish it, but they cannot take it. Like my boy Tony Knockout on TikTok, follow him if you don't. He made a great TikTok showing the Suns in the playoffs last year against Dallas, trying to dunk on them in the last seconds of the game, but getting blocked in a game that they were winning by like 20. Dallas ends up coming back and beating them in that playoff series and embarrassing them on their home floor. But every time it seems like something happens like this with the Suns, they're good at dishing it, but they want to play victim every time anyone does anything to them. And I thought Brandon Ingram's Instagram posts after the game
Oh
were
my goodness.
incredible. We're not going to say what he
Hilarious.
said. Look it up. But he called them out. He called them soft, basically. And I think that shows that the players really do not like each other, which is really what you need for a great budding rivalry. So I'm absolutely with you. I hope that they play each other in the playoffs. I think it'll be great TV and great basketball. Are you willing to guarantee a dub in this closeout game in the series, or you think there's a chance the Suns tie up the season series at 2-2?
I mean, I think there's always a chance. Like, let's not disrespect the Suns. They're a really good team. And Chris Paul and Devin Booker are a great 1-2. You could argue that DeAndre Ayton has been part of the 1-2 this year, obviously, because Chris Paul has missed a lot of time. But in the fourth quarter, when it's close, I always fear Devin Booker and Chris Paul with the ball in their hands.
Last thing on them real quick. They wanted to complain that y'all were celebrating this win in a game where they were missing Devin Booker. And Suns fans can say this with a straight face while looking and seeing Brandon Ingram and Herb Jones on the sidelines. I don't really understand it. But we're going to move on from the Suns. We've given them too much airtime anyway. So we've talked about where you're feeling at, your levels of excitement for the Pelicans, for Zion, your feeling towards their budding rivalry with the Suns. I want to break down kind of what you think the main reasons are for the Pelicans being in the position they are now as the 1 seed. Beyond just what you were talking about with Zion and buying into the system and defense, at a team level, what are they doing to produce this level of success?
Yeah, for me, I think it's the depth, man. They have one of the best benches in the NBA. I mean, Brandon Ingram has missed multiple games. CJ McCollum has had COVID, missed multiple games. Zion got injured against the Jazz early in the season, missed 4 games, and we still managed to come out with dubs in multiple games where 1 or 2 or all 3 of those guys were out. They beat the Luca and the Mavs with no BI, no Zion. And you know who the best player on the floor looked like that night? It was Jose Alvarado. I mean, they just have these guys coming off the bench that look like they can dominate games even when taking a starting spot. Like, Alvarado is a bulldog, and he's a true point guard who gets them into their sets quickly. That's something that the Pelicans have been lacking for many years. CJ arguably can be that, but, I mean, most of us know that he's a score-first guard. He is passing it better than he ever had.
Yeah, and a slower pace player. Sorry to cut you off. That's all I was going to say.
He is, right. But you see, Jose has improved his jump shot. He improved his handle by working with Tony Parker over the summer. Like, all of these young guys are really just stepping up and improving their game. Trey Murphy has had multiple 20-point games since Brandon Ingram has been out. He's stepped seamlessly into the starting lineup and gives Zion the space that he needs, shooting it from 28 feet multiple times a game, actually stepping back. They have a 4-point line during Pelicans practice. They have a 4-point line at 30 feet, and Trey Murphy is knocking down shots from there. I mean, it's pretty ridiculous. And Larry Nance has been incredibly important.
We got to talk about Larry Nance because
my God.
he seemed to be just like a throw-in on the CJ McCollum trade, kind of like an afterthought. But talk about how important he's been because, again, as a Lakers fan, I love my former guys, and I just want to hear your thoughts on how he's fitting into all of this.
Yeah, Andrew Lopez, the ESPN reporter for the Pelicans, has said that it's no longer the CJ McCollum trade. It's the CJ McCollum and Larry Nance trade because he's just so important to this team. Zion has been needing a 5 who can defend the rim and shoot the 3 ball, and Larry has been shooting at almost a 40% clip this year. No, I mean, not many attempts per game, but at least
I was
he can
about to say,
out and do it.
shit.
No, I mean, he's shooting under 2 attempts per game, but he's able to step back out there, and I feel pretty confident in him taking that shot. And I mean, Larry Nance, he's just been incredible. He's had multiple 20-point games as well. It's just like every time they need somebody to step up on this team, whether somebody's out or somebody's not playing well, they get somebody off the bench to step in and bring some energy and some force into that lineup. Najee Marshall is another guy. He has stepped up and he's playing the best basketball of his career. As Pelican fans, we get pretty wrapped up in the guys, the undrafted guys that we pick up. This is the next dude. Or they talk about with Jose and Najee, and I'm always kind of like, we'll see how it works out. And then, I mean, they really are stepping up. Willie Green has always said that he hasn't given Najee anything, that Najee has earned every single minute that he's gotten. And I always complained about Najee looking like he was out of control on the floor. But this year, he looks calm, collected. He's playing incredible defense, guarding the best defender or coming off the bench. And he's just like the enforcer that we've been missing for a long time.
Definitely. Can you talk a little bit about the rookie Dyson Daniels and just what you've been seeing from him and his potential?
Dyson, when he's on the floor, is averaging the least points per possession for opponents on the team. And you know who's second? Is Zion. I mean, he is guarding the best player on the team every single night that Herb Jones is out of the lineup. The numbers don't scream out at you. Don't get me wrong. He's averaging under 10 points per game. He's shooting 39% from three, which is pretty incredible because that was the big knock on him coming into the draft, is that he was not a shooter. But he's gotten with Fred Vincent. His shot looked pure. He doesn't take many a game. He's like Larry. He's under 2 attempts per game. But he's willing to take the shot. And if he's not, then he's attacking a closeout and getting by guys. I mean, he's 6'8". He's huge. He stays in front of people. He guarded Shai Gilgeous-Alexander this year. He's guarded Chris Paul this year. He has so much versatility. Oh, he guarded Luka in his first game as an NBA player and ripped him twice. Like, it's pretty incredible to watch.
That's sick.
The Pelicans are drafting these defensive-minded guys around Zion, then sending them to Fred Vincent to become shooters. I mean, it's a recipe for success, if you ask me.
Yeah, actually, that's a perfect transition to my next thing. Talk about the coaching a little bit. Not beyond Willie, it obviously starts with Willie Green, but even assistants like Fred Vincent. What do you think the coaching staff is doing right, whether in-game and game plan style stuff or just the culture they're instilling? What are the important changes you've seen from the Stan Van Gundy era of the Pelicans to the Willie Green era, where they've obviously, I mean, players being older another year into the league is obviously going to help, but there's been an obvious culture change as well.
There has. Antonio Daniels, the color analyst for the Pelicans, always talks about how the narrative is changing in New Orleans. And Willie Green is a huge part of that change. I mean, the assistants that he's brought on, the culture that he's brought with him, the mentality that he's brought to this locker room has really been something to see, given the Stan Van Gundy and the COVID years, where you could just tell everybody was uninterested, not wanting to play for him, and unhappy with how the way that things were going. But with Teresa Witherspoon, Corey Brewer, Fred Vincent, Jared Collins, Willie Green, I mean, I'm probably missing some names as well. Like, you got to also think about the front office with Swin Cash, David Griffin, Trajan Langdon. Everybody who's on this staff has been a huge part in creating a winning and healthy culture throughout the team. And it's something that's really goes undervalued throughout the league, I think.
It definitely is. I would say Willie Green is finally starting to get his flowers as and be recognized for what he's doing and how quickly he's turned things around over there. But the people behind the scenes and that aren't the head coach obviously go unsung in everything they're doing to help build that culture as well. So I definitely agree with that. Do you think, as someone who's on the ground in New Orleans, who's there and can kind of feel the vibe of fans, do you think that there's ever a chance that New Orleans becomes a Pelicans town and not a Saints town, especially given the way the Saints are struggling right now?
Yeah.
Let me rephrase that. Like, are people more interested in the Pelicans than the Saints right now in New Orleans?
I think so, yes. And that may be attributed to the Saints having a terrible season. Like, if the Saints were 10-3 at this point, probably not. Like, let's be realistic here. Louisiana is a football state. I think it's always going to be that. But you're seeing the same amount of support for the Pelicans that you do for the Saints. Like, the stadium is loud. And it's so loud that the Suns commentator accused us of having a boo mic in the arena. Like,
oh, yeah, and I can tell you, as someone who's gone to multiple games with you, there's no boo mic. That's how people in New Orleans are, bro.
No,
Like,
it gets
like
loud
that
in
place
there.
is loud, especially when the Pelicans are doing well. We
Yes.
went to the Pelicans Warriors game, the last game of the regular season last year. Pelicans had already locked up their spot in the playoffs, so a lot of their stars didn't play, but it was still so loud, just like the environment, because there was positivity and optimism going into the playoffs. It didn't matter
Mm-hmm.
who the fuck was playing in that game. Like,
100%.
and it was a meaningless game, and the crowd was still crazy. So I can only imagine the environment, the playoff like atmosphere against the Suns. Yeah, that Suns reporter or announcer is that person needs to go to New Orleans, because
Oh, he was
that's not
there.
fake.
He was there. He just didn't trust that the crowd was actually that loud. But regardless of that, yeah, we went to a game also on December 28th last year against the Cavs, and Brandon Ingram didn't play. Jonas Valanciunas didn't play. And Herb Jones scored 27 points, and that was the second loudest aside from Game 3 of the playoff series versus the Suns that I've ever been to. It was so loud in there. And it was crazy because our two main guys from last year weren't playing.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously no Zion either, but yeah,
Right.
I can attest, like Herb Jones, Devonte Graham, and like Garrett Temple were like,
Yeah.
and like Najee Marshall were like running things that game, and the crowd was yelling just as loud as if it had been Zion or Brandon Ingram or whoever. So the New Orleans crowd is different. You're right that Louisiana is always going to be a football state, but at least it is nice to know and nice to see that in the times where the Pelicans are good and the Saints are bad, that the attention can shift, and maybe it doesn't become a Pelicans town forever, but at least in the next few years, that's
Oh,
what
for
it could
sure.
be. Like driving around, do you see, like, I assume you see more like Zion billboards than like Cam Jordan or Alvin Kamara. Do you see more Alvin Kamara billboards or Zion billboards in New Orleans?
For me, it's Zion, but I think that's just because Zion is such not only a recognizable face, but he is a franchise player and a generational talent. And it's something that they obviously want to market because he just signed his max extension. He's going to be here for a long time. He's falling in love with the city, and everyone from the organization wants the city to fall in love with him. And he said it in his post-game interview the other day. If you love New Orleans will love you back. And I feel like he's really receiving that love this year, and he deserves it.
Absolutely. So the last thing I kind of want to get into with you is what you see going forward, mainly in this season, but we can talk about beyond as well. Pelicans have played themselves into a 1 seed now. We're a little more than a third through the NBA season. Still a lot of basketball left to go. What do you think they need to do to sustain it? And I guess before you answer that, since that's more general, are there any moves you think they need to make this season in order to shore up any weaknesses or make their playoff run more probable?
Yeah. Um, so I think in terms of the moves, the two things that I can say confidently that we are actually lacking in is rim protection and 3-point shooting. We shoot the third lowest threes in the league, and we don't have a real rim protector outside of Larry Nance, but Larry Nance is 6'7", so he's not an actual true rim protector. So I could see us getting involved in someone like Miles Turner or someone like Mo Bamba. You
Dude,
know,
we've talked about Miles Turner in the context of Zion a bunch in the past, just like pairing Zion with a five that can stretch the floor. Like if you had Brooke Lopez or
right?
Miles Turner, that just from a scheming standpoint makes a lot of sense. But do you still see Jonas as the main starter going forward, or would that be someone you would consider moving if the fit of a Miles Turner or something like that became available?
Um, that's a tough question because I really do like JV, and I think that his style actually complements Zion's as well because he
Yeah,
can
I
play.
think y'all are like first and second chance points or offensive rebounds. I was
Yeah,
looking at the advanced stats, and y'all get a ton of offensive rebounds, and a ton of second chance points, and a big part of that is him.
yeah. They just come in and win the possession game for us, and that ends up mattering in the end, especially when they're winning by 6 points. Those offensive boards really, really do matter, and JV and Zion are both incredible at getting at them for different reasons, of course. But I think Brandon Ingram and JV play really well together, and when Brandon Ingram comes back into the lineup and starts to get reintegrated, I'm interested to see if JV starts performing better because he's gotten off to a pretty slow start to the season, as well as CJ. And there's a couple of reasons why I think that Brandon Ingram coming back into the lineup could cause some problems for New Orleans, but it's just something that they're going to have to work through to get into their full form. Because the way that they're playing now is give Dion the ball. He's going to drive, and we're going to play paint to great offense, 0.5. He's going to drive, attract multiple defenders, pass it. You either shoot it or you drive on the closeout. And we just do that over and over and over again. And if you keep bending the defense in that way, then it's really difficult to defend. But having Brandon Ingram in the lineup means that he's going to need the ball as well. He's going to need to initiate some offense for us to be as versatile and as dominant as I think that we can be on the offensive end.
Do you see Devonte Graham as a player that gets minutes in the rotation in the playoffs, or do you see him as someone that is possibly moved before the deadline? How do you see his role on the team?
Yeah, it's tough because I do like Devonte Graham, and I do think his fit around Zion is really good. He's averaging 38% from 3 on 4 attempts per game. And we brought him in here to be the Lonzo replacement and to play around Zion. Zion didn't play last year. He struggled, so a lot of the fans got a bad taste for Devonte Graham. Now we're seeing him play with Zion, and his numbers still aren't quite what they were in Charlotte, but, he's starting to pick it up. This is the best I've ever seen him defend in the NBA. He's playing pretty good defense this year, which is surprising considering he's in lineups coming off the bench with Jose Alvarado. So you have 2 guys under 6 foot who are both hard-nosed defenders at the point of attack. He still gets driven by sometimes, but overall, I do think that his $10 million contract could be used in some sort of deal just because we have 2 $10 million contracts or contracts in that area, and it's Larry Nance and Devonte Graham. And Larry Nance is clearly more valuable to this team. So just the way the money lines up and the fact that Jose has been so solid off the bench this year, I do think that it's possible that Devonte Graham gets moved. And I'll be sad to see him go, but I'll understand it if it makes the team better.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I think if they're like a top 3 seed around the deadline, while the future of this team looks really bright and you have your core and it isn't all or nothing this year, if you're a top 3 seed around the deadline, you have a chance to make a run for the finals because injuries mean that anything can happen in the playoffs. So if you feel like you're a move or 2 away from really being able to compete in the playoffs, and say you end up in a series against the Suns and Chris Paul gets hurt, or you end up in a series against the Warriors and Steph Curry gets hurt or Draymond gets hurt, anything like that, like a twisted ankle, every team is a twisted ankle away from potentially winning a playoff series, and putting yourself in that position to have the lineup to be able to compete with the top dogs, even if you don't think this is like your last window or really this is just the start of your window. We've seen with the Nuggets, with the Clippers, we never really know when a window starts and ends, and going for it and making moves when you're in a position and moving towards really being able to contend. I think that you can't just bank off of, well, we're going to be really good next year and we'll probably have a lottery pick if the Lakers are bad. You got to just go for it. If you're a 1, 2, or 3 seed in the West and you think you could compete against a team like the Suns, you clearly can because you just beat them twice. Think about what a move could do against that. So I feel like if the Pelicans keep this up, a move is inevitable. Not everyone on this roster is going to end up getting playoff minutes when the rotation shrinks down to 8 or 9 people. So with that in mind, there's really no point in keeping people and their money if you feel like your goal is to get to a championship or a Western Conference Finals or whatever, and they're not going to play.
Absolutely. And the
Yeah.
Pelicans have all the assets, not only to make a move, but to make a significant move. And if that's not the right move, then to take a step back. I mean, they just have so many picks over the next 7 to 9 years that they can play with. It's just so many assets, so many young guys. There's a lot that they can do.
What players are locks do you think that they would never move? Is it Brandon Ingram and Zion and that's it? Or do you think it extends to Herb Jones? Do you think that CJ? I think that's like the main four people it would be if there were untouchables. But do you think CJ is kind of like the main person I want to ask about? Do you think he could potentially be moved for like we keep hearing that DeMar DeRozan might be on the move for the Bulls? If a player like that became available, do you think they would trade CJ or do you think he's like locked himself into a part of this core?
No, I think he's absolutely locked himself into a part of this core. CJ McCollum will not be moved. He came in and instantly bought into what Willie Green was doing and created a winning mentality on the court and in the locker room. I don't think they would move him for anything. He was exactly what David Griffin was looking for. He had been eyeing him for a really long time, and I don't think he'll be moved for anything. I think that we would take on $30 million in extra money before moving CJ McCollum. Gail Benson said she's willing to pay the tax, and for the right player, I think she would pay the tax this year.
I like that. It's interesting to see where fans kind of view players as safe or unsafe within their organization. I definitely agree with you. Beyond the actual basketball itself, bringing the experience and culture of winning in the playoffs and having done it before can't be understated. And I think that's exactly what CJ brings to the Pelicans. So to close it out, what do you think the Pelicans need to do to legitimately become a title contender this year or next year? And do you see them making a legitimate run at an NBA Finals this year, being as they're the one seed in the West where we are in the season now?
Yeah, I think they have a legitimate chance in terms of what they need to do to get to that point. Really, for me, it's get healthy. We've seen the starting lineup in only 10 games this entire season through the first 27. Um, and you saw opening night in Brooklyn. Obviously, they weren't in the best form as they are now, but we kicked the crap out of them in the second half with Brandon Ingram, Zion, and CJ all playing at their peak high level, completely healthy. So for me, I think that we just need to get healthy, be ready for the playoffs, get a top 4 seed, and we'll have a chance to beat anybody.
Hell yeah. Well, we can definitely agree the future's bright in New Orleans. The Pelicans are one of the most exciting teams to watch in the West and in the NBA overall. We're both going to be tuning into them all year, seeing how they're doing. And is there anything that you want to say closing out just about the Pelicans or about the YouTube channel or the stuff we're going to be doing in general?
Oh man, I'm just excited. I love the NBA. I love talking about the NBA. I love playing 2K. I'm about everything basketball. It doesn't have to be the NBA. It can be college. It can be street ball. I'm all about it. So I'm just excited to talk hoops, man.
Definitely. Well, thanks everyone for listening. This closes out our first episode of our long form YouTube content on the NBA season this year. Please hit like and subscribe. Check out Hoops Dialogue on both TikTok and YouTube, and stay tuned with both our short and long form content. We'll be making content about the NBA season and all things basketball going forward. Thanks, y'all.
Peace.